Hey, my name is Marco, and in this presentation I want to demystify the spiritual language that is being used to describe the process from insight to enlightenment, because these terms have so much loaded weight to them, and nobody really understands what they mean, which is very crucial if you want to integrate peace in your life. But spirituality is really just the path of psychological liberation. There's nothing mystical or magical about it. It is a path that moves you from existential discomfort to sovereignty and your true sense of beingness. It is psychological health. I've had quite the journey behind me where I struggled a lot with existential issues for many, many years. I had a lot of existential fear, and I struggled and tried to figure out the solution to my struggles through philosophy. And I also got traumatized by a few psychedelic experiences that really changed my perspective of reality, which is just one part of the trauma story. So when I was a kid, my child self was actually quite happy. Like, look at how cute I was. Such a cute little guy. So I was probably around 8 years old at this time, and I was very content and happy and just playful. What I started to notice though is from a very young age, I struggled with nightmares. I had so many problems going to sleep, because going to bed was just scary to me, because I knew I would be confronted with some cosmic horrors, if you so will. And also every time I felt physical pain or I got sick, I remember even as a kid thinking to myself, this is too bad to be acceptable. So the struggle with suffering actually started very early. And then while I grew older, in my teenage self, I became a mess. I was so depressed, so insecure, that I couldn't deal with anything really. I was feeling so alone in this existential struggle, because I couldn't understand how everybody just accepts reality for how it is. I wanted to figure out the true nature of reality. I wanted to figure out what it really means to exist, or why anybody's here. And I just was completely stuck in my mind and lost. And philosophy, I think, is what most people relate with when they are in this existential funk, and they hope that philosophy can solve these issues. And it's really just an issue of identity. It's an issue of personally not being at peace with reality itself. So through 9 years of struggle, I found existential peace. I understand now what it means to become whole as a person. So I created a community that reached at its peak 100 members, so that I could help them with their existential struggles. I did all of this for free, and then I started to coach them one-on-one and help them to guide them to whatever particular flavor of problems that they had. And it's individualized, right? Because some people are more philosophically oriented, some people are more spiritually oriented, some people just have a lot of internal shame or insecurities or resentment. And then I learned how to adapt my teachings to this individual person, because each journey is very much unique, but the core truth is principled. You can actually repeat it. And this is what I learned through this time helping other people. This community right now is private, and I've transitioned into professional practice to help people with existential transformation. From the story that I've told you about myself, the question I want to ask you is, who in this image is the real me? Is it the 8-year-old happy guy? Is it the angsty 13-year-old teenager? Is it the stoned early adult, existential crisis 2.0 or 3.0, you might say? Or this person who has his mind together? This is what we're going to explore now through these different levels of insight towards the path towards self-realization and enlightenment. So who in this image is the real me is, of course, a trick question, and we will explore this throughout this presentation. First, it's important that we define what these things actually mean. And insight is noticing a truth about how reality or your mind functions. It's a noticing of truth. The important aspect of this noticing is that it is a self-noticing. It is a part of you that you can call the self or the true self, depending on how you want to call it. And it notices something about yourself for itself. This means that if somebody judges you or criticizes you, it's very difficult for this to actually work. This is why existential information is not the same as insight. Collecting information is comfortable. That's why everybody spends hours and hours on YouTube and just consumes content to numb himself down, because this way it doesn't actually reach the self. And I'm going to explain this further soon. But it biases you towards comfort. You can never actually gain insight about yourself because you don't have to do it yourself. Just people are spoon feeding information into you. This is why actually having guidance is very helpful. And integration is only real when it is self-created, if you have realized something for yourself in this process. Because the big filter for insight is the ego. Most people can't ever access insight because they have an illusion of identity. This identity blocks out any possible change because it doesn't want to change. And insight always means figuring something out you didn't know before. It makes change inevitable. The ego is what you think you are instead of the self. The ego is also that which makes you insecure, depressed, lonely, fearful, sad, unhappy, existentially confused, and stuck in your mind. This feeling of being lost in this world and not really finding your place is 100% because of your sense of identity. It is not a thing you want to have. It is not something that is healthy for most people, especially if you're here in this video. What happens is that when you receive a new bit of information, for example, criticism or a new idea, it enters your awareness and then wants to move from the awareness through the self, integrated within your mind or your body and your nervous system. But the ego, what it does is that it filters it, and then it filters it into a deflection, a self-judgment or just a judgment, and a rationalization. For example, somebody criticizes a behavior that you do, and then you deflect, and instead of thinking about if this could be true or not, instinctively you feel an emotion, which is the ego, and then you say, no, you are actually the lazy person. You are actually the insecure person. You are actually unproductive, or don't do the dishes enough, or whatever it is, right? Another reaction is that you judge yourself. Oh yeah, I am just a loser. I suck like this. I just cannot be this person that you want me to be because I am just not good enough. So self-judgment is also ego. Ego isn't just to think yourself better than everybody. It can also be to think yourself worse than anybody else. It is any mechanism that causes comparison. And then another ego mechanism, which I love to do, is rationalization. This is where a lot of philosophy comes into place. This is where you don't really integrate it into the self, but you just think about it as some intellectual idea, some abstract thing. And then often what you can do is you can play in the realm of maybes. Yeah, maybe I actually am a bit mean to you. Maybe it is the case that today I have not put my best foot in the place or whatever. So you can even pretend that you're doing something productive or you're realizing something that is sincere, but it's actually just in the mind. It doesn't actually touch you. So what it does is it moves you towards comfort. It makes you feel at peace. But if it reaches the self, if the big filter doesn't activate, then you can actually engage in sincere self-reflection, which will sooner or later lead you towards insight, which is the main building block of existential transformation, of stopping the suffering that the identity is locked in. So this transformation then goes towards the sense of identity because you change your behavior, therefore change your identity, and then this increases your awareness. You can also call awareness consciousness if you so will, but yeah, this is the process that happens. And this is what you want to do, because the more aware you are of what the ego does, the more you sense an integration towards the self. Now, the ego is like the big insight bouncer. It basically doesn't let the insight find fruit in the self. And it happens through the ideologies that you have. Like you have some sort of mental framework of how things are supposed to work societally. And if it goes against this narrative, it goes against your identity, and therefore it doesn't reach you. So you cannot expand your perspective. Then it is limiting beliefs that you don't question. You think that you are just not good enough in some fundamental way. Maybe it's fear of self-worth, and this then causes you to act in a certain way or think in a certain way. It's philosophical systems you cling to, which is very common. I see a lot of people that cling to the idea of determinism and then use determinism as a form to not take responsibility for their actions. That's extremely common. And it's tricky because there's, of course, a truth in determinism that is important to acknowledge, but it's very, very common that the identity clings to determinism. And it's not about if it's true or not, it's just that you feel comfortable in that. And that's why you have a good excuse to not act out what you actually want to do or what the self wants to do. And then there are assumptions you mistake for truth, which is crucial. And yeah, how to relate to this entire system. Memories you hold on to, like past traumas, past regrets, uncomfortable moments that to this day haunt you, and feelings you don't want to feel, which, if you really investigate, all of these point to the same thing. Like each one of these bullet points is exactly one and the same, because they all point to the false sense of identity. So you want to deconstruct what the ego is to find genuine insights. And insights are like blessings. They bless you in that they open up the door to a more sincere and happy form of living. So through insights, you gather enhanced problem-solving skills because you suddenly see new ways that think out of the box. And now you actually realize, oh, I can change my environment. I can actually become a different person. You reduce mental suffering through every insight you gain, and you find mental resilience in that because now suddenly you're not that attached anymore to your egoic identity. And if you're watching this video, you likely have experienced this already to a certain point where the suffering has decreased, or the identification with your thoughts has decreased, or it's a bit easier to feel your emotions. Then you gain greater autonomy and are not that easily manipulated by your own mind, since you understand the true nature of how your mind works and what it is that is actually driving you. You are able to connect deeper with yourself and other people because you're not just interacting with their superficial ego of them or yours. You're actually going deeper towards their self as you open up your own self more. And you find that you are way better in making decisions because you are in contact with what you actually want and not what your false identity is trying to tell you. It is the main core block of existential transformation. So insight is how you grow as a person by dissolving the ego. You observe the nature of how you are, the functions of the self, and you understand therefore the nature of reality itself. The reason you understand the nature of reality itself through this process is because everything is being filtered through your mind, and the mind distorts what reality actually looks like. So by this integrating or integrating the ego with the self, you start to get into direct contact with the nature of reality. And here it becomes very mystical and very spiritual, but this is what, Buddhism has always pointed to. There are many techniques and frameworks that help you cultivate insight and strengthen this observation. And this is a ton of what my work is about. I currently have uploaded a guide on my Substack that you can check out in the link below. There's a free version, which is basically this YouTube video and some additional content on the Substack. And then there's also a paid subscription where I publish these guides. So as you make the ego more transparent and you loosen its grip on yourself, the filter reduces, and what you'll find that it was always overcompensating for insecurities and the feeling of loneliness and all of these negative mental garbage that has accumulated over the years. And the reason it is doing so is because the moment it becomes more transparent, you also start to feel more. So the self, basically, you could also call it the unconscious, it puts everything that you have been hiding from yourself into your consciousness. And this is why conscious awareness also increases, because you are blocking, you're opening up the filter that has been blocking all of the things you want to feel and need to feel to become one with yourself. So then the question becomes, okay, what is a realization? And the realization is the connection of insights that form in your understanding. So basically, an insight is like a building block for a greater realization. So first, you might notice that the voice in your head is constantly narrating and judging and planning, and you have really no idea where the next thought will come from. And then, you become aware of that. You notice, wait, this voice kind of works on its own. And then you start to notice that it is very painful to focus on these thoughts. And when you actually don't focus on these thoughts, then things are actually kind of okay. It's the painful memory that you're always thinking about that causes the pain. And then you might have the realization that you've been protecting and worrying about a fantasy that is not real at all anymore. And then this alleviates some of the pain that you feel. Multiple realizations about the self then create an awakening, which is the realization that your entire life to this point has been a dream. Your ego identity was never real. So this realization can feel extremely profound, and this is where the spirituality of it all comes in. And the moment you have had an awakening experience, all of the philosophy and intellectualizing starts to become real in a different way, because now it's felt. It is so direct in your experience that all philosophy and rationalization starts to become a lot less effective, because the self forces you to feel these things now as you awaken that you are not real in the way you thought you were. You're not a solid identity. You're not anything you can hold on to. And this can feel extremely destabilizing. And this is where a lot of people find these videos that try to help them, because it's existentially extremely disorienting. Because also in the West, we don't talk about the intensity of these experiences. They can get so crazy. Psychedelics is also a way a lot of people find their first awakening, as they start to understand that their mind is much more malleable than they ever thought. So what basically happens is that the ego disintegrates into the spiral. The spiral then becomes all of your awareness. The entire path becomes your awareness. And this can feel like dying. It can feel like you're getting sucked into the void. And then suddenly there's a sense that reality is not real anymore. And the depression might even deepen, or you get even more anxious. And this is also where the meaning crisis comes in, that everybody's kind of struggling with, because it is somewhat a universal problem, even before awakening, that we know that something is wrong. Something that we think about how this stuff functions isn't right. It's important to understand that this is a spiral. So you go from insight to realizations to awakenings to further insights to realizations to awakenings, and you spiral deeper and deeper into it. This is why you revisit the same ideas again and again and again, because even if you had an insight or a realization, there's a depth to it that you're always underestimating. And then you find the same idea out again from a different angle, and it has different effect on your consciousness. For example, you might be very much in the camp of free will, and then suddenly you have a realization that reality is determined and everything just moves on its own. And you live a while like this, and then you kind of cling to this idea, and then you have this realization at some point that, oh, wait, I am actually in control of my body. I can actually influence reality because I am my body. I am actually the thing that moves reality in a certain direction. And then maybe you go back to determinism at some point again, because you realize, wait, but if there's no self, then who is actually controlling anything? But it felt so real that I have responsibility. And then you cycle through this. And this is just one aspect out of so many, depending on how many constructs your ego has created to protect you from the self. And this is why there's, different timelines, different experiences. There's no journey of the spiritual path that is the same, because everybody's very unique. So you go deeper into the spiral, and this is where you can see that these are the pillars of wisdom. You have insight, realization, and awakening, getting integrated into awareness and the self, which then becomes one, and ego slowly integrates and becomes one with all of it. And then the last part is to question, okay, so if this is the journey that you have to realize, the integrated nature of all of it, then who in this image is the real me? Well, it's all of them. There's no part that wasn't me. That's why you see me in the picture. It might sound very obvious. But in spirituality, there's often this desire to transcend the body and transcend the personhood. And then you don't actually integrate your past experiences. You don't integrate your trauma. You don't really think about who you were and how you came here. And it is a part of all of this where you stop believing in the story of your life. You stop really be attached to it. But you can't rush this process. At the end, if you go in front of the jury and you tell to the jury, No, I didn't commit the murder. It was me from 5 years ago. It's not my true self. It won't work. Right? It won't work. It's this being disconnected from reality. It's all you. So through this understanding and this realizing and making it embodied, not just as an idea intellectually, but feeling through it, you enter and dissolve into the spiral. And then you become completely one with your consciousness. There's no identity anymore that is solid and clings to whoever you are. Because you see yourself as all of it, and then by becoming all of it, you also kind of become none of it. Because there's no attachment, there's no particular point that you're trying to hold on to. And this is the moment of self-realization. It is an intense experience once you find this point. And this is what a lot of people in spirituality are really seeking towards or trying to find out. Because at this point, all of the existential struggles pretty much cease. Not all of them, but a huge part of the suffering that makes you want to seek out the truth of reality, or want to find out the nature of existence, or whatever, or wants to cure the depression, or whatever it is, stops. There's no self anymore there, or there's no identity anymore there that clings to these ideas, and you feel pretty much at peace. So self-realization is the abiding recognition of you as dreaming without being identified with the illusion of the dreamer. This is also called abiding awareness or stream entry. So what tends to happen is that when you find this shift, your awareness and perception of reality fundamentally shifts. Like there's an actual qualitative change in experience, because now there's no center to experience anymore. There's no aspect of it where I say, this is me, or I am this thing behind my eyes. It's just all of this entire ball of awareness. And yeah, all of the mental suffering ceases because the ego has become transparent. And you have an unshakable certainty in being. You know who you are and what you are. You've found yourself. And it's the death of the story of your life. So I showed you the picture of the person that I was, and I've integrated it so I can clearly say, this is me. But personally, in my own mind, I don't really, I don't have a narrative about it anymore. It's irrelevant. It's just one more human life. There's no hero's journey, and there's no epic discovery or whatever. It's just me. It becomes very special in its ordinariness. And what people actually want oftentimes when they want to become enlightened or whatever is to make oneself special and what make oneself be important. They want to increase the ego, because actually dissolving it is scary. This is why the ego loves self-realization. It loves the idea of labels and terms to get a new identity from it and get a new sort of comparison for it. I'm self-realized and you are not. But the moment people do this, what usually is happening is that they're not realized at all. They're just attaching themselves to a label, because their self-worth is now in a spiritual domain. It's now a spiritual ego that needs to feel secure by saying, I am whatever it is, right? And this is a huge problem why people never reach deeper states of awakening, because they already want to skip aspects of the integration part and attach themselves to a sort of label. This is especially problematic in what I'm trying to do, right? Because I am helping people professionally through this. And there's, of course, a difficulty here, right? Because on one hand, I want to say, yes, I understand what these things mean, and I want to help you get to this point. But then also boasting about my own state of self-realization or whatever then becomes a marketing ploy. And this is what this word has become. And it's kind of difficult, right? Because I want to talk objectively about what it is, but also don't want to pretend that there isn't a weird dynamic going on, because in spirituality, it is so common to use these terms to boast one's ego up. So in reality, self-realization is a non-identity. You don't really feel identified with it. I use it as a descriptive term to describe a shift that I've actually experienced, but I don't really care about the term whatsoever. What I care about is that you completely forget these labels as something that you can be or can become, because that's not about that. It's just a new identity mechanism that can be applied as a big filter, because if you are self-realized or whatever, then now you don't have to hear this new criticism and you need to reflect or gain further insight, right? It becomes a new ego identity. What really all of this is about is to stop feeling bad about yourself. It's about living a life that you feel good living in, where you're actually content. Mental peace, freedom, clarity, purpose, sovereignty, connection. These are the things that we're actually looking for. The labels are irrelevant. If you find this is all that matters. What you can imagine then is once you are in the state of peace, the reason how it functions this way is because the ego now has become transparent and the self and the awareness is directly connected. And this is how I try to visualize this. So it's not that the ego disappears all of a sudden when you realize the self, but the awareness and the self have become one unit. The ego has become transparent. It's not more you than any other aspect of yourself. And this is why the filter doesn't work anymore, or it's very, very strongly weakened. And yeah, you usually can find people like this when they are, very open-minded, or you can recognize they have nothing really to defend. They might still have opinions. It's not that they're right about anything or they don't have opinions that they defend or whatever, but it's not really about them anymore. And most people, when they have opinions about things, well, they never want to be convinced of them being wrong because it would threaten the ego identity. And at this state, it's very easy to have conversations with people because they see the truth in almost everything. Because you can't find truth in almost everything. It's only the ego that doesn't want this to be the case. So from there, the awareness increases further, easily, more directly. And this is why in Buddhism, they say that once you reach stream entry, enlightenment becomes inevitable. It is only a question of time. In Buddhism, they talk about multiple lifetimes as a possibility on the same life. I'm actually not a Buddhist, but the framework is interesting because it makes sense. There's not the filter anymore that would decrease insight. For me, it's now very easy to directly come in contact with whatever I experience. There's no filter that wants me to not feel my emotions or not think about a mistake that I've made or whatever. There are no stakes in it. So then you have the complete pillar that slowly disintegrates the ego completely, which is realization, insight, awakening, self-realization, all becoming one in awareness, and therefore disintegrating or dissolving the ego into the self. So the difference between self-realization and enlightenment, what you could imagine, is that at self-realization, there's still an ego there. It's very transparent, but it still exists. And the path from self-realization to enlightenment is the complete disintegration of the ego. And it's in a way inevitable. It's just how the river will flow sooner or later because you cannot unsee anymore what you've seen. But yeah, it's also the thing is also that at this point you're not really looking for enlightenment anymore because the distinction kind of stops mattering because there's nothing really that you want anymore. There's no desire to reach any particular point anymore, which can cause its own problems, right? Because you're not driven by your ego. But yeah, you usually are pretty much at peace at this point, and it's very unlikely that you're actually even looking for existential transformation or anything alike, because you're just happy. There's nothing to change from your life, practically speaking. You just like being yourself. So yeah, and then enlightenment is the complete sensation of all delusions created by the mind. This would then be the complete disintegration or integration or dissolution, whatever you want to say, of the ego. So then this would dissolve into this. So this is then how it would look like from complete enlightenment. There's actually no ego anymore to even be transparent at all. You're just completely dissolved into absolute reality. Because there's no filter anymore. There's just complete direct contact with awareness. And of course, if you're philosophically oriented, then there's probably a question of why would this be called absolute reality if it's just a subjective experience still. But this is also a topic for another time. What is important to notice is that these conditionings still exist in any sort of realization. That's why sages and masters take decades to get enlightened, because what some people call enlightenment is self-realization, and what some people call self-realization is just an awakening. And people tend to kind of skip parts, but this process, depending on who you are, can be very, very difficult and long. And most people get trapped in some sort of egoic thinking, which makes it take way longer or make people never get there. And that's why I also got helped a lot with talking to actual masters and teachers, because they see you in a way, because they reflect your own ego in a way that you can't do it alone. you think you can do it alone, but you just can't because you're blind to your own blind spots. It is important to understand that each aspect takes its time, and since it's a spiral, you will revisit the same ideas again and again and again, and you never want to think about being somewhere ahead, or being in a certain stage of these labels. I think this framework is useful to understand what is going on, but not to compare yourself to any of it. So don't rush things and take everything at your pace, because depending on what life you've lived and the attachment that you've had, it might take longer than another person. And if you got stuck along the path, that's, I think, the worst that can happen. If you're stuck along the path because you started to identify as being self-realized or whatever, and then you are in the state for like 10 years, but you're still suffering, well, it's super difficult to get out of it because you have like such a strong identity now about being in a certain enlightened state. And then to disintegrate this is so painful. It's so painful, but it's necessary, or you will never keep developing. And this is why if you get trapped, it will take longer. And that's what I try to help people with, to avoid that, because it's just really not necessary. It can go way quicker and be way smoother with the right help. If you understand that what I'm talking about here is the real deal, and you want to gain deeper insight about yourself and the nature of reality, check out my Substack in the top link in the description. There I write deep essays about the nature of reality, consciousness, and how to actually apply those insights for your existential transformation. And beyond that, if you're really serious about finally transforming your life and changing your relationship to reality, then check out my one-on-one guidance program, where I coach you directly with everything that I know to show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. And I hope this was helpful, and I'm glad that you're here.